Hi, I'm Rob, and welcome to the Uncut Network. Every month we rotate between directors, actors, and super specific genres. We cover everything from exploitation to things your parents will absolutely approve of, relative unknowns to household names, and everything in between. The Uncut Network is the movie podcast of all the niches, and to cover all of those things and more, I'm joined by Rabia. Hello there.
Hiya. Happy to be back.
Yes, and not a cursed episode. We've got a history of those. And Ygraine, hello there.
Hi.
How are you both doing?
It's doing interestingly. I guess I'm floored by hay fever at the moment, so we're just trying to survive the season. That and a lot of festive. So
It is a rich vein, isn't it? Festival season just seems to start earlier every year and last longer every year.
pretty much.
Yeah, Ygraine, yourself?
Good. We just had a bank holiday here in Ireland because of good old St. Patrick. Just the same as yourself, just trying to catch up on all that festival work as well. You think you're all prepared, and then all of a sudden you've got like 30 films to be watching, and then you tend to forget that you've also got to write a review about it, so you're like, balls. But yeah, so just playing catch up at the moment.
You've got to respect Kat's ability to just watch everything and review everything.
Yeah.
There's just a monkey's paw or something, I think, that she has somewhere. The ability to do that. This week it's a director's episode, the first of a two-parter. I'm saving those for people who deserve it. In season 2 we kind of just gave everybody one, not the wisest. And this week it's Park Chan Wook. So, immediate response. What are our feelings on Park? Have I got that right? Because the Korean names are
it's Park Chan Wook. Park Chan Wook. So the R sound is more for the non-natives. But yeah, if you say it in proper Korean Hangul, it's Park Chan. Park is the last name. Chan Wook is his first name.
Yes. It's the same with a lot of Southeast Asian. The names are reversed, aren't they? So we're all saying them wrong in the West.
Oh, it depends. I mean, it's normal to say the last name first and the first name last. So, like in Japanese, also, East Asian names happen to be like switched around. But yeah, it's Chanwook-shi is very personal to say that because you don't know him personally. So, especially in those areas in the world, you would address someone by their last name. So it would be Park or Mr. Park.
Well, I know when at a festival and I see him, I know what to call him now.
Yeah, so you would say Park-shi or Park Director Nim. Yeah.
Okay. What are our feelings on his work as a general sort of entity, I guess?
I love his work. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I'm on this episode. I happily joined this. But for me personally, I like his older work more than his newer stuff. I'm a big fan of the Vengeance trilogy, which we're going to talk about in a bit, but also his shorts, like Judgment, for instance, from 1999. It's 26 minutes. You can find it on YouTube nowadays, and it's 26 minutes of just ultimate Park Chan Wookness, if you ask me. It's in black and white. It's a story with a lot of twists and turns, and by the end of it, you're just like, what did I just go through?
I know I'm watching after this then, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I can recommend it. I think what he does well is taking the audience through this both emotional as well as logical journey where he plays with our perception through our emotions, and he doesn't have a ultimate good or evil in any of his stories. So all of his characters are gray in one way or another. There's no ultimate good or evil, and I think that's his ultimate thing, right? Like, what drives the character? Is it anger? Is it guilt? Is it vengeance? And then that's how he writes his stories.
Ygraine, feelings on Park?
Park Chan Wook is, if not my favorite, one of my favorite directors. Probably followed closely by James Whale, but anything he does, and especially like I'm with Rabia, his older stuff is I kind of vibe with a bit more. And he's just one of those directors that is such an all-rounder. You know, you've got some directors that you're like, yeah, I like their visuals, but you know, you can tell who they are by their visuals and their visuals alone, whereas I feel like Park Chan Wook is everything. He's the sound design, he's the visuals, he's the set pieces, he's his characterizations. He's just this amazing all-rounder and real gothic as well. And like, I've always been really into the gothic, and a lot of his older stuff is very, I mean, I guess even some of his newer stuff like Stoker as well is very kind of the gothic leaning, but with his own kind of take on it. And yeah, like Rabia, I just love the fact that a lot of his stories, there's no protagonist or antagonist. It's very this kind of grey moral area with a lot of his characters. And that's something I really, really love. And I find that he writes both male and female characters really, really well as well. It's something that I just absolutely adore about him.
It wouldn't be me doing my due diligence here because you both said the same thing. You prefer his older stuff to his newer stuff. So what's it about his newer stuff that doesn't quite float your boat as much? Just out of curiosity.
I think for me, it's that it's less raw than its older stuff. In his older stuff, he lets characters be more real, and there's no it's less polished. Whereas if you look at his newer things, such as Stoker, Decision to Leave, Handmaiden, it's more cinematic, it's more polished, and it affects how deep he goes and how visceral he goes with some of his storytelling. Whereas if you look at his older work, even to something like I'm a Cyborg and That's Okay, which is about mental health, it's a lot more raw than the work that came after that.
Yes, I mean that is a very underappreciated movie of his body of work. I'm a Cyborg. People just forget it exists on a regular basis. Deserves a bit more credit. But Ygraine, yourself, is the same, different? I'm not sure.
Yeah, pretty much the same. Yeah, I just find there's a lot, I don't want to sound pretentious, but I feel like there's a lot more depth to his older stuff and a lot more, I guess, a lot more ambiguity, I think, a lot of the time. You know, there's a lot more kind of room for interpretation, room for kind of reflection, especially when we kind of relate back to how we feel and how we relate to that piece of art. I find that there's a lot more to his earlier stuff than there is to his later stuff.
It's fine. I like all of it. I'll be honest, I'm kind of very easily pleased. But yeah. So we are talking about the Vengeance trilogy, but two specifically, the OldBoy and Lady Vengeance. I've never called it the OldBoy before. That's a slip of the tongue. But, before we get into it, just anything on Mr. Vengeance is the one we're not talking about. Is there anything that sort of that strikes you about that one? Because for me, that's an important movie for me because that was one of the pivotal titles for me discovering Korean movies. That and Memories of Murder. It was a big one for me. It just a real lightning bolt moment. But for yourselves,
well, I think it is the interesting thing about the trilogy, right, is that it wasn't supposed to be a trilogy. He made Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which the Korean title is actually Revenge is Mine, directly translated. And it's one of his most raw movies. If you look at it, it's really based in realism and anger. There's this cycle of guilt and revenge that keeps going until, spoilers, there's nothing left and no one left. And then once you go through the trilogy, OldBoy is based on a manga, and it's slightly more stylized and still very, very raw and based on all of this absurdism, basically. And then you get to Lady Vengeance, and Lady Vengeance was actually only made because during an interview after doing OldBoy, he was asked if he was going to do a trilogy or more movies with this theme of vengeance, and that sparked him to making Lady Vengeance. And if you look at the three, it's a progression of most raw to more polished, more cinematic, where Lady Vengeance was actually made for that purpose to become this last part of a trilogy that was first unplanned, where the first two were just made separately without that particular trilogy in mind. So it's kind of this bookend to this feeling that he had already sparked with his fans and his audiences. But and the Korean titles are all interesting. So you have Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, in Korean it's Revenge is Mine. OldBoy is just OldBoy because that's also the name of the manga. And then a Lady Vengeance in Korean is actually Kind-Hearted Gumja. Gumja is the main character also that we follow, and it has to do a lot with the character's drivenness. You know, what are they driven by? So yeah.
Maybe, honestly, I kind of prefer the Korean titles. I think they get to the point a bit more, don't they? Really, don't they?
Yeah, but then if you look at an international audience and sellability and how distributors work with these, especially America, tends to dominate as they are the biggest buyers back then of these Asian titles. So it doesn't surprise me that they made those Vengeance titles to make it one full package, basically.
I guess that's true. Ygraine, your feelings on Mr. Vengeance?
So when I first came to this trilogy, I worked my way backwards. So I was, for one of my birthdays, I think I was like 16 or 17. One of my friends bought me Tartan Asian Extreme DVD of Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. And so that was my first introduction. And then I went back to OldBoy. And so I almost feel like by the time I got to Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, these two films, OldBoy and Lady Vengeance, were such massive, like megaliths for me in terms of like what I'd seen up to then, what I knew about cinema up to then, that when I got to Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, it was almost like not as hard hitting for me. It didn't leave like the same kind of impression for me. And I feel like I've carried that on into my adult life, that it still hasn't left that much of an impression on me. I keep meaning to go back and do it in the proper order, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But yeah, it's did not have as much of a lasting impression on me as the two other films.
Just kind of agree. I mean, the only thing I really remember is how horribly awkward the final sort of 5 minutes are and how lingering it is. That's all that stands out for me, this far removed.
Yeah, because for either of you, do you also feel that, I mean, all three of the movies obviously have this certain cycle that comes to a very devastating end, but all in a different way. But for some reason, indeed, Mr. Vengeance is the least popular, I think, because it is the most raw and most, most Park Chan Wook actually of the three movies. It's the most pure Park Chan Wook you can get to. But what do either of you think that makes it less popular with the audience?
I think OldBoy is the most popular because it was that right movie at the right time. It was the movie that a lot of people discovered Korean cinema through. So I think that's kind of a lightning rod for popularity. As beyond that, I honestly don't know. I think it's just the recency bias maybe at the time. People don't like going back and watching older stuff and really, do they? In the zeitgeist sense, I mean, like, when something's popular, it's like it's popular now, and then 5 years time, they'll what's OldBoy? I forgot what that is completely. But yeah, that's my take on it anyway. Whether it's accurate or not, I don't know. I'm not talking about podcasters or people who review or go on Twitter or Letterboxd or anything, just in general sense.
I think it's not as hard hitting as perhaps the other two. It's a bit more quiet, if you want to call it that. I think, like you said, it gets more cinematic as we get towards Lady Vengeance, and I think obviously people, especially like film people, are very visual, and so I feel like those two, like OldBoy and Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, are a lot more visually striking, and I think that really grabs people as well. I know for me, it just, especially Lady Vengeance, like I basically made that my whole personality when I was 16.
Amazing.
Worst films to use as a model. I mean, with my generation, it was Donnie Darko. Everybody wanted to be Donnie Darko. It was just awkward.
No, I for real want to be Lee Gwemja. I was just like, I used to wear the red eyeshadow, and everyone was like, "Wow, you're really into My Chemical Romance," and I was like, "No,
Nope."
Don't be ridiculous.
That is beautiful makeup, though. Also on the cover when she wears it. I mean, isn't there also a point in the movie, if I remember correctly, where she takes off the eyeshadow just to put on red lipstick instead?
Very symbolic.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we'll do these movies chronologically. So we'll start with OldBoy first. Who wants to take a swing at... We'll go into spoilers because I think this far removed you kind of have to, and it's a little awkward to talk around them in the case of OldBoy.
OldBoy, yeah, we have what's his name? Dae-Su is a man, and he exists. And one day he gets picked up and thrown into a hotel room for 15 years. No explanation. He's being fed. He's being kept alive. He's socially and virtually isolated, apart from the small interactions that he has with the TV and the people who bring him food. And then one day he wakes up in a trunk in the middle of a field and he's been let go. And he is out to find out who took him, why they took him, and how he can kick their asses into hell. But there's more to the story. Did you want me to give you the full spoiler synopsis? Do we just go straight
I
into
think
the
we
details?
get there when we get there. I think that's enough. Sort of like set the
Okay.
stall.
Then the yeah. So then the main thing is a man wakes up, Dae-Su, and he's like, "Okay, I've been taken for 15 years. Very specifically 15 years, by the way. There's a reason why it's specifically 15 years. And now he's out to find out what, who, and where, and how, and whose ass he needs to kick to take revenge."
Ygraine, your feelings on OldBoy?
I adore this film. I think it's just so smart and it's so shocking, but not in like, I mean, yes, gratuitous, but not in like a super gratuitous way, but a way as in you're watching it and as it goes on, you're just like, oh, holy God, what the hell? And whether it's that reaction towards its violence, towards its like torture scenes, or towards the big reveal, you're just like, really? Really? And I think it's this great kind of almost moral compass. I love these films that put you in the situation of the main character, where it's like, if I got put away for 15 years in a hotel room with just a TV and meals, apart from personally for me, that sounded like heaven. I'm like, what would I do if I just got out one day? Like, what would I do? Would I go hell for leather of vengeance? Would I just get on with my life? And I feel like OldBoy does a fantastic job of putting viewers into that situation and saying to them, is vengeance worth it?
Yeah. Rabia, same.
Yeah, +1 on everything that was just said. To be honest, it's indeed the question of, okay, you're following a person, and is vengeance worth it? And is vengeance actually vengeance, or is this a different cycle that's going on? Because just because you're getting a perspective of a person going through this situation doesn't per se make them the good guy or the bad guy. So just they're not per se the good guy or the bad guy, and especially the manga that it's based on has a lot of these themes going on as well. They really in so this is a Japanese thing. In anime and manga, they really have a thing for the whole sister complex, the whole incest thing. It comes back as one of the plot points in an OldBoy as well, and it's very interesting how there are so many parallels. Eventually, once you've watched it and you understand what's going on, and then you look back at all the moments you've been through, things will fall into place, because how long he's been taken has a reason. Why a certain situation has been created has a reason. Everything has parallel, or actually this long drawn out plan that comes together towards the end, and it's devastating. If you see the ending, you really get what the character's going through. Oh, yeah, it's fucked up. That's the best way to say it. I'm sorry, part of my English. It's fucked up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was one of those sort of, oh my God, they didn't
Yeah.
sort of endings, the first time you say it. But I think for me, it's just really visceral with everything it does. Like the first thing he does when he gets out of captivity is he wants to eat something alive, because for the past 15 years he's been fed these little dumpling things, and that's it. That's all he's eaten. So it's a very raw performance from Choi Min-Sik, especially when you consider, in the case of that scene, he's a Buddhist, so he being like tasked with eating a live octopus is very demanding from the director. I think I'd say hugely demanding.
Yeah, I think Park Chan Wook was asked, like, what was it? He was like, did you feel sorry for the actor in those scenes? And he was like, no, I felt more sorry for the octopus.
Yeah, and just imagine they had to grab a new live octopus every new take that they did, and there's also a specific way that you have to eat like a live octopus. So I've been to South Korea. I go pretty much every year, and it's a delicacy that you can pretty easily get there. It's not something that they do in the same way as in the movie. They'll chop it up and it's still squiggling while you're eating it, and it squiggles mostly because of the soy sauce that makes it rigor morty a little bit. But they give you very strict instructions, because if you're eating octopus, the tentacles, the knobs on it still have a lot of suction power even after it's dead. So if you don't properly chew and you swallow, you could die by asphyxiation, because the knobs will grab into your throat and just get stuck. It doesn't matter how much alcohol, water, anything that you drink, they will not let go. So you have to like properly chew. Yeah.
It's just not worth it though, is it?
No.
Huge spin in that scene, isn't it?
Yeah, but that also makes sense why he's eating off the head in those scenes and not the tentacles, even though the tentacles are the more tastier parts.
But yeah, it's an incredible performance. It's the same with Mr. Vengeance. Names I'm forgetting here. Park Song Ho. Yes, am I getting the name right there? It is, isn't it?
The name of the character or the name of the actor?
The actor.
Oh yeah, that could be. Hold on, I can quickly check for you. That is the main character. Ryu is Shin Ha-kyun. Kang Ho is the
Song
other
Kang Ho,
guy.
there we go. Yes,
Song Kang Ho. He's also in the host.
Yes. In the case of both of the movies, Mr. Vengeance and this, they instantly became favourite actors just because of the time that it came at, really. Sort of mid-noughties, this sort of stuff in American cinema was quite... I don't want to be condescending or bitter, but it was quite tame, really.
The noughties was a rise of Asian film in the West because of all these imports. We had Ringu come over, we had OldBoy come over. This is like 2002, 2003, 2005, Lady Vengeance. You had all this rise, this Asian wave as they would call it. And it showed that filmmaking didn't have to be this ultimate good versus evil and action-based sequences, but that you could direct and do storytelling through emotion, through situations. And in Park Chan Wook's case, I think what people tend to forget with all three films, especially also with OldBoy, even though it's based on a manga, is that the main character is not the main character is not the characters that you're looking at. The main character is vengeance. That is what's driving from beginning to end the whole story. Whether you're looking at sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, OldBoy, or Lady Vengeance, the main character of the movie, regardless of the other people that play out, is vengeance itself. The concept of vengeance.
Yes, it is. But I can't really follow from that.
I'm sorry. I just word vomited all over your points.
No. I mean, it's just very well cast across the board, really, isn't it? It's an entire spectrum of sort of emotions. The girl that he meets, that seems a random occurrence, is quite meek, and he comes into her life as this sort of like force of nature, this violent force of nature. Not in the sense of he's sexually violent or anything like that. Really, he has a blip where that looks like it could happen, and maybe in the hands of another director it would have happened. But in the toilet, I'm referring to.
Yeah.
But I think he gets away with an awful lot just by being taking that distance of having vengeance as the main character.
I definitely feel like you were saying, kind of, Dae-Su is definitely almost like a tornado, and unfortunately Mido is very much collateral damage. And even though she's not fully aware of it, like, she is getting caught up in how damaging vengeance can be, and that if he just stepped back to see the full picture, she wouldn't be swept into it. And I almost feel as well, we'll kind of move on to the ending, and I know there's a lot of ambiguity when we get to the ending, but I just feel that, and I guess this is one of the reasons I love it, but I feel like he's quite a selfish character that, objectively he should have stepped back and be like, this girl is super young. I know there was like extenuating circumstances with the hypnotist, but it just feels like he's not a likable character. And he brings down anyone that is kind of within his circle, whether it's his friend who gets murdered because he's brought into his vengeance plot, whether it's Mido being brought into something she's not fully aware of. It just feels like he is just one of these really toxic, parasitic type of people, and he's barely even an anti-hero in this film. And it's definitely one of the reasons I like this film so much, is that we don't have a likable character.
Yeah.
It's when he's introduced as well. It's about 10 minutes of just in a police officer's sort of holding room where he's manic. He's a manic drunk, I guess is the easiest way to describe him.
Yeah, but even in the scene where we get the big reveal, right? The first big reveal of then this downward spiral we go into, Woo Jin, the guy who, is eventually the guy who held him captive for his own revenge reasons, gives him an out. Clearly at that point gives him an out. Like, okay, you kill me now. It's before the reveal happens. He's giving him an option to, like, okay, you can now in this moment choose to just kill me, and then it's done. But he chooses not to, and that's when eventually the reveal is, revealed. And he regrets. That's that final piece of ultimate revenge of Woo Jin, of like, you could have not have known. You could have lived your life, and you would have not. My vengeance would have been incomplete, but you would have been fine. It would have been still fucked up, but you would have been fine. But because you're so messed up as a person, I know that you would not let that slide. So here you are. This is that final piece coming into place.
Yeah, because he does. At one point, he has a notebook, doesn't he? And he writes down all of the people that he may have wronged. And the fact that the worst thing is not what he did, not what he caused. It's the fact that all that happened and he forgot. And he's got this book of all these other people that he's wronged. I mean, they really do double down on him being just horrible, a real sort of human vermin, really. But compellingly so, I think. It's you hear so many people talk about movies being bad because everybody's hateable in them. It's so common with so many people. But OldBoy gets by in it, really. It's curious, I've always felt.
I think that's helped a lot by a lot of black humor within the film as well. And I think that makes it quite easier to get along with when you hate pretty much 99% of all the characters in this. Perhaps the only nice character is Mido. She is the innocent one out of all, the only innocent player in this whole game. But yeah, I think the humor within this, like even the opening scene, like that is funny. That is hilarious. And even the way that when he is imprisoned, how the TV becomes like a friend to him, I think is quite humorous, and it's obviously a bit of a commentary on perhaps people's reliance on TVs and how much it kind of quells a loneliness that someone should feel. But yeah, and I think that's something that the director does really well in a lot of his films. He puts in a lot of like real black humor pieces that you just do not expect in his films. But yeah, it just works so well.
It runs really nicely.
On that TV thing, it's a thing that I didn't really pick up. Maybe it's like a language thing, I don't know. But after he's left 15 years, many people are saying, why are you talking like that? It's just a little sort of wrinkle that sort of escaped me, I think.
It's
I'm not sure if
so the Korean society has progressed really fast, especially in the past 20 years. So his accent is too old, basically. The way he's pronouncing and saying things, it sounds weird to modern Koreans at that point, because he's been held captive for so long, and he's only interacted with the television with they always use like a certain type of politeness form on TV, so he has not progressed language-wise with society because of his stagnated position with only having the TV to interact with.
It's like when he meets that gang of kids, isn't it? And they call him something like a dick wad or something along those lines, and he's like, "What? Like a what?"
Dick shit. I've not heard that before.
That's it,
yeah, and
which is the humor, isn't it?
Yeah, because especially in Korean society nowadays, if you were in Seoul, for instance, so in the capital city of South Korea, how they would pronounce things, like say words individually and the sounds that come with it, because a lot has to do with what they call mouth feel. So the position of your mouth and your tongue and your teeth while you're pronouncing something. Nowadays, they've condensed all these words and given them different sounds. So, and that's happened within the last 10 years already. So let alone in 15 years, if you've not interacted with anyone and not have gone along with society in that way, yeah, you sounded completely different, basically. As if someone would go to England and go like, yeah, you olden days, and oh, why have to something like that.
You just go to the north and everywhere is like 10 years behind. I think it's similar experience. I'm speaking as a northerner, so I'm allowed to say that. The thing which stood out for a lot of people, I think, is what gave the movie a lot of notoriety is one. It's not the twist, although that certainly has its punch. It's one sequence. It's the one take in a hallway with a hammer sequence.
Infamous fighting scene. I think it's been satire. It's been copied. It's been honored even in Disney series or Disney Marvel series like Daredevil. They did their own version of that particular scene. Again, it comes back to that rawness of Park Chan Wook, right? He's not per se an action director, but this particular scene, he goes into vertical alignment. He does a lot with his camera work when it comes to playing with perspectives, right? So sometimes you're looking from above, other points you're looking from below, and this particular scene, you're zoomed out and looking at it as a whole. And that 2-minute sequence is uninterrupted, uncut, one go of him plowing through all these people who had to do something with his kidnapping. So he's just working his way through, and I think that's the beauty of Korean cinema when it comes to these fight scenes, is that it's again so I use the word raw a lot, but I'm trying to say visceral. I'm trying to say unpolished. I'm trying to say realistic when I say raw. Probably it's absurdness in realism, basically, and he's just working his way through. It's not super choreographed. It's just a man swinging a hammer like a freaking maniac to get to the other end.
And it's such a like an ode to Park Chan Wook about the fact that this scene has seeped into popular culture without people even knowing where it's from. Like, I can guarantee, I could talk about it to like my husband who's never seen OldBoy, and he would know like several other references to it in whatever other thing and I just feel like that's such an amazing thing for, especially when we think about how the West, Americans, British cinema has not been exactly receiving to cinemas of other cultures, but the fact that a South Korean film can seep into Western cinema as well, I think is just amazing. And yeah, I love that scene. I love this scene mirrored with another scene later on where he meets those men again. And it's so funny because all of them are on crutches, have bandages on, they're all like casts on their arms. And it's just so funny to see the damage this one lad can do with like a bunch of like gangster. These men are not just like your everyday guy. They are like, this is what they do on a day-to-day basis. And the fact that he could just go through them with something like a hammer,
plowing through the gang members.
It's one of the yeah, absolutely. The one thing I like about Korean films in general, it's if this was American or produced American, that scene would be full of guns and all sorts. But because it's so hard to get guns in Korea, you find a lot of crime movies where they fight with knives and tomahawks and all sorts, and it's just down and dirty. It's just really down and dirty. Just looks painful. I mean, that scene starts off with him pulling the boss's teeth out with a hammer, which just kind of shows you the level of depravity, I guess, which this movie, goes for.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has that like relatable violence, doesn't it? Like, you know, if you've got guns, you're like, well, not everyone knows what it's like to be shot with a gun. So you're kind of like, meh. Whereas like, you know what it's like to be hit by a hammer, hopefully not through violence, but like we've all kind of, you know, accidentally hit our fingers or, you know, accidentally perhaps dropped a hammer on our toe. We know what it's like to have like someone messing around with our teeth, or we can imagine anyway what it'd be like to have someone, you know, pull our teeth. So it's that relatable violence as well that really causes audiences to like feel it viscerally.
Yeah, I think we have to talk about the twist now. We've talked around
Oh,
it
it's come to it, has
goodness.
somewhat. Well, in essence, it's simple. The simplest way to say it is often the best. So Mido is Dae-Su's daughter, and through hypnosis, they're sort of led to each other. And yes, there's incest in this, father-daughter incest, which is
On
just
screen, very, very raw, by the way.
super icky. Yeah, super icky. It's
He takes her virginity, and
yeah.
I mean, Park Chan Wook like zooms in, and you can hear the smack, smack, smack sounds while they're doing it. So it's not just like an off-camera thing. We've seen them like properly do the deed, and then we find out that they're father
Yeah,
daughter.
there's no like tasteful pan to the curtains as something happened. It's right in there with them, and it's horrible, really, isn't it? I mean, even all these years later, you think movies sort of lose the power, but OldBoy it just feels worse, honestly.
But for me, I don't know if both of you feel the same. I mean, first everything falls into place, right? Why he was taken for 15 years, because by the time he's released, his daughter is of age, and that's why she makes a good candidate to then become hypnotized and driven into Dae-Su's arms so that she can lose his virginity to him, hence mirroring the situation of revenge, because Woo-jin, who was doing it with his sister, was discovered by Dae-Su when they were younger and spread the rumor, causing her to commit suicide. That's actually the big plot that drives, you know, the whole story. So that 15 years comes into place, but then when we get, I don't know if we're ready to go towards the ending, because that for me was even like, whoo. That one hurt even worse once you see that final expression. But when you get that first reveal of like, okay, their father and daughter, that's the first like knife that hits you, or like visceral reaction you get to it. But then,
yeah, the use of presence. That's it's one of these moments which is heartbreaking and hilarious at the same time. I don't think many other people could do, because all he needs to do is show the gang guy is with Mido and she's got a present too, and he just loses his mind, I guess would be the easiest way to describe it, culminating with him acting like a dog and cutting his own tongue out, which is...
Yeah, but Park Chan Wook pulls no punches, because he finds out, he cuts out his tongue. He then decides, okay, I need to not know this, goes to the hypnotist, has his personality split into the man and the monster. And then the hypnotist says, okay, the monster's going to walk away from this chair and snow and take the memories with them. And the man will not know. So the man can be with Mido and the monster will be, you know, hidden away. But then, second twist, you see that Mido finds him in the snow, and you can see that he has stood up and walked away from the chair, meaning that he is not the man, he is the monster, the person who pertains the memory. Which makes his final laugh, you know, this agony expression of pain so much worse, because he went through all of that. He cut off his tongue, he got re-hypnotized, to only end up still knowing that he, you know, slept with his own daughter.
Yeah, he knows how to leave an audience, doesn't he? Park Chan Wook. It's just, and it's real. Like even that bit, it's real subtle. Like you can see like the graying of his hair, because one of the things the hypnotist says, with every step you will age. Like. And so when Mido finds him, she's like, look at you, what happened? You know, and his hair is really grey, a lot more grey than when we first see him. And you're like, oh my God. You're like, oh no.
He must be in his 40s there, I think, Min-Sik. So,
yeah.
like he was kidnapped in his when he was 30 or so.
Yeah.
late 20s. Well, he looked old for his late 20s if that was the case. But yeah, it's a really nasty ending. But those are the ones you remember, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
Those are the ones that stick with you. Any other thoughts about OldBoy before we move on?
One of the things I really love is it has this Frankenstein element to it. And at one point, even Woo Jin even says, like, I'm the creator and you're the monster. And all throughout, Dae-Su is referred to as like the creature, the monster, the beast. And I feel like we do have this real Frankensteinian element to it, where Woo Jin is the creator who wanted to create something, but in the meantime, it destroys Woo Jin as well as affecting his creation, Dae-Su. And I just, I love Frankenstein. So any little kind of reference to it, I'm going to absolutely love. And another thing, I saw Park Chan Wook refer to it as a Greek tragedy, and it's so obvious, especially when we look at the characters of Dae-Su and Woo Jin. Dae-Su's very mortal, kind of played around by this godlike creature of Woo Jin, who doesn't seem to have aged at all, compared to Dae-Su. He's omnipresent, he's powerful, he's rich, and I really love the idea of looking at this. Apart from like the Oedipus kind of references, obviously we've got going on, but it's this real like Greek tragedy of like gods and men.
I never noticed that Frankenstein thing.
Did you know?
Absolutely not, no. That's absolutely a first to me. But
anything I can like find a reference for Frankenstein, I will find it.
The interesting thing, it's always the case with movies that are sort of pinned on. This isn't pinned on a twist, but the twist sort of changes the dynamic of how you view something on repeated viewings. And this is only the second time I watched it, because it's not the sort of movie that you just crack on. It's not a fun time, is it? It's a miserable time. So this time watching it, my immediate feeling was I was always trying to square the circle of, is it justified? Is that level of vengeance justified? And I don't think it really answers that question, to be honest. They both seem very irrational, despite Woo Jin being very controlled and controlling and very successful. He's a very successful businessman who lives in this high rise. But yeah, they're both irrational men taking out their neuroses on each other, and it doesn't really take a stance like you both mentioned earlier. None of these are right, none of these are wrong. It's just a horrible situation for everybody involved, and nobody wins.
Yeah, it's a very gorgeous moment when Woo Jin goes into the elevator after having completely broken his creation, his Dae-Su, and then you see his face morph into what is left there for me now that I've completed my lifelong work almost of completing this vengeance.
Yeah.
And there's just so much despair in this film. It's definitely I would not watch it for funsies. That's definitely
Absolutely not. Well, there's that idea, isn't it, that everybody says about revenge movies. If you go for revenge, you've got to bury two bodies, basically. And it's never really more nuanced than that. And as far as the nuance of revenge movies, I don't think I've seen it done more grey, I guess, like shades of grey than this. Maybe there's others, but off the top of my head, no, it's as complex as the revenge dynamic gets, I think, this one.
Are we going to talk about the remake?
No, because it's a hate crime, and I do not acknowledge it. Neocolonialism is not part of my vocabulary.
I thought Spike Lee was better than that, but apparently it was a big paycheck. I don't know.
Look, again,
terrible.
What you can see with a lot of not just Korean movies, also other Asian movies that get remakes in the States that are completely unnecessary nowadays. Like for the time of The Ring, it made sense, right? It was still an emerging market. We didn't have streaming services and all that kind of stuff yet. You were very dependent on distributors buying in Asian titles to have any access to them. So having an English remake of a really good Asian title made it more accessible, and then had people find this interest and go online and find these titles. We're living in the 2010s, 2020s. I mean, you don't need remakes anymore because it's become obsolete. You can watch Train to Busan, and we don't need Midnight Train to New York because it's not going to be the same thing. It's going to miss all the cultural references.
Well,
It's going to miss all.
I'm kind of interested in that one. I do like Timo, but
But the only reason why they put Timo on it is because they wanted someone Asian, which is again an insult.
yeah,
Because why are you putting an Indonesian director on a remake of a Korean movie? It's
very, very
exactly
different cultures.
it's what they did with Oldboy, right? You're putting a black African American director who is BIPOC on a Korean remake, and they put Samuel L. Jackson in a fucking kimono, just for cultural background. The Japanese were imperialists and invaded Korea and did horrible shit. So having a Korean movie then replayed by Americans where they wear a freaking kimono to represent Asian culture is the biggest fuck you in the face of Asians that you can. It's a hate crime. It's just like Death Note. It's a hate crime. I do not. As you can tell, I'm very, very heated about this as an Asian myself.
Not a fan then. Not a fan.
No, I think I saw it when it first came out, just out of like morbid curiosity, and since then I just have not touched it at all.
And I think everyone who's been involved with it has officially like denounced their. Spike Lee doesn't want to talk about it. What's his name? Who played the main character? Doesn't want to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about it anymore because everybody knows it's a stain on their reputation, and it was just a good paycheck.
Yeah, it was a watershed moment, really. Yeah.
There was talks of them doing Lady Vengeance as well, and I was like, I'm ready to go to whatever studio it is and pick it.
Yeah, it was like a watershed moment. Before that, everything was like, when's the American remake? But after that, sort of those conversations basically went away like they always should have, really.
Yeah. Look, there's 2 American remakes that I support of Asian films, at least. And that is, like I mentioned, The Ring, that came out at the right point at the right time. It was well directed. It was supported by the original director. So that was fine. And there is a Hong Kong movie that got made into an American movie that even got an Oscar nomination. And I'm thinking of both titles, and neither of them are coming into my head. It has Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio in it.
Oh, Infernal Affairs.
Yes, Infernal Affairs is the original Hong Kong title, and then I always forget the American one as well.
It was a Scorsese movie, wasn't it?
Oh, The Departed.
Departed. Thank you.
Yes.
Departed. So The Departed, it was nicely done. It didn't have the same feel as Infernal Affairs, but at least it put it in cultural context that made sense, right? They put it in American cultural content instead of pretending it was an Asian thing and let's just copy this 101, but then still fail it. I'm very sour about that kind of stuff, as you can tell. So The Departed, I was like, okay, we're cool with this. This is fine. We can deal with this. But yeah, no other remakes. No, not for me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It should be left alone. I remember that it wasn't Asian, but there was a Spanish one. I think it was a Chilean one take horror movie. I can't remember the name of it.
Oh no, you mean the Spanish Wreck?
No, it was a Chilean one. It was the whole thing is like a one take.
Oh, the Silent House, La Casa Muda.
Yes, it was only remade because subtitles.
They did that with the French Martyrs or the Martyrs as well, and they lost the whole plot remaking that movie. Martyrs is French extremity at its finest, and then they remade it, and I don't know what they did, but they shat on it.
Can't say it better than that, really. So that leads us to the second movie of the evening. 2007, I think I've got the year right. Lady
2005.
Vengeance.
2005.
No, oh, yeah. Chronologically, I'm bad at it. Okay. So I think we've kind of established the fact that this is Ygraine's wheelhouse. So, Lady Vengeance.
So Lady Vengeance centers around the character Gwemja, who, as a teenager, she got pregnant and decided to ask her past teacher if she could move in with him. And so when she does, he unfortunately treats her very badly, but also asks her to help him kidnap a small child. And when he kills that child, he wants her to take the blame, otherwise he will kill her baby. So Gwemja takes the blame, and it's, this massive media circus, and she's sent to jail. And whilst there, she becomes known as a witch as well as an angel through her really kind-hearted acts towards fellow prisoners. So she takes care of the elderly, she helps out people who are being attacked and assaulted. And we think that she is like this heavenly creature until she is released. And it turns out that through all these kind acts, she had actually been planning a revenge against this teacher, and she is using her friendship with these fellow women to enact that revenge. And yeah, it's basically all about how she wants to find this teacher and not only bring about her own revenge against him for taking away her freedom and her child, but also revenge for the killing of that one child, and the fact that because she took the blame for it, it caused a catalyst events where he also went on to murder more children. So it's about her plan to exact vengeance, but it's also her reckoning with herself as well.
And again, as I mentioned before, this the Korean title is Kind-Hearted Gumja. So Kind-Hearted Gumja.
It fits the story, I think, rather well.
Yeah, definitely. I love that synopsis that you just gave, Ygraine.
I was like, I don't know. I could just go on and on and on, but I won't.
It was perfect.
Yeah, this is a weird one for me because this open admission here, this is my favourite Park Chan Wook movie.
Same.
It always was. I always felt like the weird one. Like everybody was sort of, why this one? This one's really bad. OldBoy's the great one. And this has cemented my feelings a great deal. This is probably his most diverse movie because it starts off quite. It's non-linear. It's quite a chirpy, upbeat movie until it's not, and when it's not, it's probably the most emotional any of his movies have ever been. So yeah, it cemented my feelings. This viewing, I adore this so very, very much.
I love how you see a different type of vengeance in this film. Especially with the title, right? She's seen also in the film, like just described, she's seen as the kind-hearted Gumja, and then to know that all of this time in the back, she's been brewing on this, and it's not just her revenge. There's more layers to it. She's offering by the end of it a lot more people closure as well. So even though through all these acts that are oh my god, I'm forgetting the word. I cannot English anymore. Premeditated. That's the word I'm looking for. All these premeditated actions that set her revenge into action. By the end of it, after everything, she's also still offering a whole bunch of people closure. So it's not as visceral and raw as the first two Vengeance movies. And it's the most self-aware of the three, which makes it, I think, also the most approachable one. It's the more cinematic one. It's the one that Park Chan Wook specifically made to round off this trilogy as well. A trilogy that he himself did not know he was making. So it's interesting that this particular film and these themes come together to this very beautiful vengeance movie. It still has this rawness. It still has this very realness, but also a lot of surrealism in it. And I think where in the first two movies, characters are driven by anger and freedom, she's driven by salvation, right? More than all the other aspects of emotions that she could be feeling. So she's not only providing salvation for herself, but also eventually for the parents of the other victims.
And it's such a visually stunning film as well. And there's actually two versions of it. There's one where it's colored all the way throughout, and then there's also one that fades to black and white. So like you
the one
said,
that I watched.
yeah, like you said at the beginning, it's all colorful, and at some points it's quite, especially in the prison sequence, there are parts that are quite funny and jovial. Like one where she saves another prisoner from being continuously sexually assaulted, and the woman like slips in the pool, and she just holds up a bar of soap and is like, "Da-da!" And it's quite jovial for such like quite heavy matter. But then as the film goes on and she gets deeper and deeper into her search for revenge and redemption, it fades to black and white and the color just seeps out. And it's just, I remember the first time I saw that version, I was like, is there something wrong with my TV? Like, what the hell's going on? And I had to look it up because I'd only ever seen the full color version. But the fact that that's out there, and just even when you do watch the color version, at the beginning, it's all very saturated with color. Her outfits are colorful. Her makeup's very light and airy. And then as it goes on, she wears black and red. And everything is dark. And it's either white and black. Even the setting is white and black. It's snow against the darkness of the old schoolhouse. And then we've got stuff, like you said, the surreal areas that come on. She has a dream where she's dragging the teacher along. But he's like an old dog kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
so very weird.
Yeah, and I feel like this film is almost horror adjacent, because I know the first time I saw it, I felt like it just feels really horrific. OldBoy's horrific because of its subject matter and like its gratuitous violence, but I feel like there's something so deep and insidious about the horrificness of Lady Vengeance that just got me.
It's the teacher as well. I mean, OldBoy's sort of unrelentingly bleak. There is no light in that movie. It's just nastiness from frame one. But I think in the case of Min-Sik's character, he's like, death comes with like a smiling, jolly face. He's an English teacher. He dresses sort of very colourfully and chirpily, but the darkness beneath that is probably the darkest thing that Park Chan Wook has ever done. So it's that contrast, I think, between the colours and the darkness and also it does have a relent in the prison sequences, the stuff that the relationship with the daughter that she reclaims reluctantly, the boy who works at the cake shop. It's got these light touches that I think give it a levity, and that elevates it, I think, a great deal. So. Yeah, but I think it's around the time the daughter leaves when when I really started noticing the colour drain. I might be wrong in that, but it was around then.
I think that's one of the strong things that Park Chan Wook does, right? He has this way of using like visual suspension without exposition, where in a Western movie or like an English spoken film, you would have like certain explanations, or someone would, explain what's happening in the plot. And he is simply through visuals already making you feel certain things before you get to know what's behind that feeling, either through colors, also through his angles. And I think in Lady Vengeance, because it's the most self-aware and the most stylized one of the three, you could really tell he's come into his own playing around with these elements to show and not tell.
He also does show, and if that doesn't make you cry, I think you've got the stoniest heart of anybody who's ever walked the earth. This is a devastating movie in a much more cruel way, I guess, than even OldBoy. You say that's fair? Maybe. I'm not sure. What do you two think?
I do think, I mean, obviously anything to do with child murder is quite, but the way it kind of, it's not the character of Mr. Back, he doesn't do it for any other reason than he just hates children. And it's just such an evil characterization of a villain. Like this guy, you look at OldBoy and you think the villain, Woo Jin, isn't really a villain. There's quite a grey area there when we think about his villainization. However, when you look at Choi Min-Sik's character in Lady Vengeance, he is pure evil. Any normal person was like, I don't like kids, so I'm not going to be a teacher. However, he decides to teach kids and kill them just because he finds them annoying. And like the fact that he keeps keepsakes as well. And, he sexually assaults Gwemja as well as the woman that he's taken kind of as his wife as well. He's just an evil, evil character.
Yeah. And the one point that I kind of didn't follow, because there's the cameo here for the other lead characters in the other Vengeance trilogy, Shih Ha-kyun and Park Hang. Park. I'm bad with names, sorry. That scene in the alleyway when them two attack Gwemja, the justification for that kind of feels out of nowhere. I mean, for me, that's the one scene where I'm a little bit confused by, but
it mostly had to do that he wanted to bring all those characters back in this one movie. I think he's explained it also in interviews. Again, because Lady Vengeance was made, to make the 3 movies a trilogy. He felt that, let me just kind of like make it a bookend type of feel, like have all these characters come back one way or another. So indeed, like Song Kang-ho and Shin Ha-kyun come back as assassins, I think, if I remember correctly, in that weird scene indeed. But it's more that he needed a place to put them, to go like, hey, you see that? You've seen these people. You know who they are. You've seen them before.
Yes.
They're not part of the story, but you know who they are. Little nod.
I do love that scene though, because like obviously they get attacked and her daughter is there with her, and at first she has this real emotional reaction to it, and then she takes this breath and she starts walking quite calmly, and it feels like this point for her where she realizes, I cannot enact this plan with emotion. I have to be cold. I have to be quite logical about this. Otherwise, I will get me and my daughter and whoever else is around me hurt or killed in some. And I feel like it's amazing contrast with OldBoy, because he is the one that reacts with emotion. And it's really funny when we think about how people talk about the way women and men react to things. There was like, women are the crazy emotional ones and men are the logical ones. Whereas, in this film, there's this real feeling that Gwemja is cold and logical because she has to be. Whereas Dae-Su was, the wild, emotional one that ends up making a huge mess. And so as much as the scene doesn't really make sense, I love that scene for its its character development within Gwemja.
Because that is the theme, really, for all of it, isn't it? It's a stealth Christmas movie as well, just putting that out there.
It is.
That's when she gets released. The one of the underlings of Woo Jin in the previous movie, the first time you see him, and that's the thing of these movies, you see a lot of recurring actors. You see Mido is a news reporter in this as well. Very stealthy bit of cameo work. But they all say of Gwemja, you've changed. You're not like you used to be. So this is sort of a situation that she's has to address, really, in order to progress with her situation and their plan. And her amazing gun, I'll just have to say, that she inherits from a North Korean escapee, which is, it's iconic. That gun, really, isn't it?
It is. I feel like throughout the film, though, she does have to keep switching characters to get to where she wants to be. And I think we've got this really interesting, she's called the witch kind of in the beginning, then she's called an angel when it comes to prison. And I feel like, a lot of the time, again, it's this characterization of women themselves, especially female characters within movies as well, that they either have to be really bad or really, really good and angelic. And there's very, very few kind of fully dimensional characters where we're like, well, we're not completely innocent and we're not completely evil. Women are, well-rounded, 3-dimensional characters, multifaceted. And I feel like this depiction of her journey from witch to angel to, her almost like an angel of vengeance. And then at the end where we see her take all her makeup off, everything's been done. They're all sitting around having a bit of cake. And she takes all her makeup off, and it's like, it's this portrayal of this is now, she can just be Gwemja. She doesn't have to be anyone else. She doesn't have to hide under masks, under characters, under what other people think she is. She can now just be Gwemja. Yeah. And I think that's such an amazing journey, and one that I feel like I really resonated with when I was 16 years old, because when you're a young teenage girl, you're trying to figure out who you are. Am I the angelic one? Am I the rebel? Am I this, that? And I feel like that part of the film apart from the really gory scenes, because I was a complete gore hound, still am, but that's what I was looking for when I was a kid. But I feel like that part of the film really resonated with me.
Yeah. And there's a little bit of cultural context to that as well, right? Because she gives her daughter tofu at that point. But when she comes out of prison, she throws away the tofu that is given to her. And tofu is given to people who come out of prison to show that they have cleansed themselves, that they're purified from their mistakes and their sins. And now they eat the tofu raw and white with it's like uncooked raw tofu that you eat to symbolize the purification process that you've done for atoning for your sins. But because her coming out of prison, she wasn't done with her story yet. She wasn't ready to eat the tofu yet because she still had to keep those masks on. So when she goes to Jenny, her daughter, and then says like live purely and gives her the tofu, and then I think she splashes her face into the cake afterwards.
Literally puts her face into it, yeah.
That's finally when she accepts that she's ended that chapter. She's finally ready to move on, and that shows in the cultural context as well.
Yeah, and you have to have the cultural context of just what countries like South Korea and Japan are like. They are, say they're male dominated would kind of be undercooking it a little bit.
Very patriarchal societies, definitely.
Very, bordering on just plain-faced sexism and the way their societies are set up. So all of those subtexts, they take on not that they're irrelevant to the West, but they take on an even heightened relevance in the East, which makes them, in this case, kind of feel it.
Yeah, I mean, it plays out into current modern Korean society where now women have just blatantly refused to marry or bear children because of their status within society. And there is now a shortage of newborns and women in general that are available to marry, because there's this whole movement now of Korean women saying like, if we're not treated properly, why should I become part of society in that sense?
Yeah, they are two countries that the population is actually shrinking. Like getting smaller year on year. I think Japan lost 800,000 people last year, getting smaller as a population. So.
And there's hardly any newborns. In fact, in South Korea right now, they've reached a point that there were no students for the fresh new year of elementary school.
Oh wow, that's bleak.
Yeah,
very bleak. But to take a stance of this woman sort of empowering herself through her choices is very bold for a South Korean director to do, given that this is the context that exists within.
But we even see that reflected, when she does go to prison and she kind of goes through, or, when she meets back up with everyone who's been paroled and she goes through their backstory. And a lot of them, they're in prison because of a man, whether it's, they were sex workers and, they may have killed their pimps, or they killed their cheating husbands or abusive husbands, or, she's there because of a man.
One of them.
Ate them. Yeah. I mean, sure. Look, listen, who wouldn't get rid of the body? But, a lot of them are there because of men. And, she's there because of a man. Her daughter was adopted out because of a man. And so, I just feel like even in those little bits, Park Chan Wook is still reflecting like this is the problem with patriarchal society, that we're punishing women because of men's doing. And I think it's just a really interesting examination of the horrors of patriarchal society and the fact that it's women and children that get hurt the most from it.
I mean, that's how Gumda ends up in the whole situation, right? Because women are punished for teenage pregnancy or pregnancy out of wedlock. So the only person she had to turn to was that teacher, or Choi Min-Sik in this case. And that spiraled her whole story forward into what she had to become. Whereas if that wasn't the case, if the society had been more accepting, she would have never been in that situation where she had to, help kidnap and do sex work and then eventually end up in jail.
Yeah, and it's the fact that even in the beginning where the teacher's like, where's the father? And she's like, he's just a child. And it's like, yeah, well, so are you.
Yeah.
But you have had to mature and become an adult in the space of like a couple of months because of this pregnancy. I think a lot of this in just its small moments and its throwaway pieces of dialogue, he really sets up the culture and the society in which this story exists in. So we get an idea of what, like you said, what drives her to unfortunately be in this situation.
Yes, I think we do have to talk about the instance in the abandoned school, because that is one of these scenes that you're either fully on board with what it's doing, or it drives people away, which was a bit of a surprise to me. Because this is the scene where they have the tapes, because that's the sort of killer he is. He keeps tapes of the poor kids as he kills them, which is just...
And keepsakes.
beyond grisly.
Mm.
Yeah, it's very, very grisly. And she gives the parents the choice. Do you want to take revenge into your own hands, or let the police do it? So it's one of these movies is very critical of the law. And one of the people involved is actually a policeman who, I think he vomits when he finds out how complicit and how bad he was at his job and how he let this happen, basically. So that whole final segment, I think, is the icing on the cake, really, because I think it's very cathartic for a lot of people and a lot of stories that are out in the world right now. Just what would happen if we were given that chance to address the person who took away our child, or what have you. And it's very, very powerful scene.
Yeah, again, I think it's just Park Chan Wook, again, putting the audiences into those positions of being like, what would you do? Because, if you saw your child being murdered on tape, like, your first thought is, I'm going to kill this fucker. Like, I know as a parent myself, that is exactly the first thing I would be like, give me, that's all mine. The guy who
picks up the axe.
Yeah, literally, I'd be like, give me, that's all mine. But I like the way that he shows both sides. There's some people that are like, no, we're going to let the police handle it, etc., etc. I do like the way they're not all like, and he shows the human side of them. They're not all like crazy bloodlust, kind of like, let's get in there. Some of them are throwing up, some of them are freaking out. It's people with heart problems. Like, it's a very... I feel like if we saw this in an American film, it would be very much like, yeah, let's all be gross and, get in there. Whereas I feel like this is a film that has heart, and it's in that moment, as grisly and as gruesome and as gross as it is, this is where he shows the heart of it.
Yeah, definitely. And again, coming back to that piece of salvation as well, right? Salvation for her. It's a bookend for the parents. They finally know what actually happened to their kid, and they were able to have the choice to do something about it. So as bleak as it is in the ending, the parents seeing what there's happening to their children, it's not as visceral. It's not as bad as the ending of the other two vengeance movies, I feel, because even though there's, everyone's definitely affected for the rest of their lives, it's not, the cycle is ended. They put a stop to it, basically. There's an ending to that cycle of vengeance and guilt and anger.
Yeah, and we've also got a little bit of a redemption arc for the police officer, for the detective as well, I feel, because he's still his character arc and his story is still a little bit like, I have my thoughts about it, but so when she gets caught or whatever, she confesses, they bring her for a dramatization, basically to reenact what she did. And because she wasn't the one who killed the little boy, there are certain details that she doesn't know, such as like, what color pillow did she use to smother him, etc. And the detective guides her on it. He's the one that kind of says, like, and I always wonder whether it's because she's told him that her daughter is in danger, or whether he just wants a conviction. He just wants to get a killer because of the pressure of the media, of the public, whatever. And I feel like down the line, when he realizes that because of this conviction of Gwenja, there were more kids that were killed, and so he needs to atone. Atonement is the big subject, the big theme for this film, that he needs to atone for that. And so with this killing of Mr. Back, he needs to turn a blind eye, and that is his redemption arc as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he does get involved as well. He shoots the gun a few times into him at the end, so he has his pound of flesh too. But yes, it's a excellent film, I think. But just any final thoughts before we wrap up for this week?
Watch it last. if you're planning to watch all three movies, even though we spoiled the shit out of them at this point, uh, if you're still interested in watching them and you watch this, you've listened to this podcast first, watch them in order because you're gonna be disappointed if you watch them the other way around. So watch Mr. Vengeance, Old Boy, and then Lady Vengeance, because then it will climb up feeling wise. However, if you want to be very cruel to yourself, then watch it the other way around.
Like I did.
I don't think these are sort of movies. I mean, if you're talking about American movies and you talk about in the detail that we had, I think you know exactly what sort of movie you were in for. But I think there's a degree of style and delivery which Park Chan Wook has that doesn't really come across when you're just talking about it. He's a very, very visual director. His movies are stunning, whether it's sort of the grungy noir of OldBoy or it's almost like what's the name of the director? He did Amelie. It's has like an Amelie sensibility for a lot of it. Lady Vengeance until that colour starts draining away and then it just feels something completely other altogether. So he's playing with style in a way which a lot of other people might treat this or might not use in the treatment of this material, I think. So we have spotted it, but not really.
There's still enough to enjoy when watching it for the first time.
Ygraine, anything left on Lady Vengeance?
I don't think so. I think I've pretty much I love this film. Like it's one of my favorite films. It's in probably my top 3. And yeah, I think I might bring back the red eyeshadow. Although I don't know how well, like a mid-30s person can do that.
Fuck it, do it. Yes, I say yes. Age ain't nothing but a number in this case. Do it.
She was that age in the movie, so why not?
That's true.
Still of age.
That's true. Yeah, still desperate for the coat. The coat that comes up like right, it only shows her eyes. I had one once upon a time. I had a coat like that and I lost it in a nightclub and I would give any sort of money to get that coat back.
Just summing up feelings on Park Chan Wook, really. Going forwards, just the entire sort of package on who he is as a director.
I think, like we've mentioned several times before, he's just such a visually strong director, regardless of which genre he's tackling. Because he's done horror, he's done gothic, he's done thriller, he's done drama. He's done so many different things and from different angles. And I think to get the purest form of Park Chan Wook, you should watch his shorts. He's done several. He's also been part of anthologies. And you get to see him have like real fun because he can play around with it in like a few minutes and get you from one point to the next. And especially the anthologies that he's been part of, it's some crazy stuff that he does in there. But like I said, also Judgment.
It was 3 Extremes, wasn't it? It was in one of them.
The first 3 Extremes, where you also have the infamous dumplings sequence. He's part of that one, and he's part of 2 more. He did 3 anthologies, I think, in between Old Boy and Lady Vengeance. So he didn't do any feature films between the 2 movies, but he did several anthologies between those 2 movies. So and it's very interesting to see because that also bleeds into how he eventually makes Lady Vengeance, because he learns from those different playing around with these different genres and situations to create more of his style. Old stuff. I'm all about Park's old stuff, but his newer stuff, very gorgeous. He is a director who, in my opinion, cannot make anything wrong. It might not always be my cup of tea, but whatever he makes is always visually and like narrative wise very, very strong, regardless if it's your genre or not. It's undeniably he's one of the strongest visual directors of current times.
He's working in TV at the moment, isn't it? I think he's got a TV show with Robert Downey Jr. that's about to drop at some point this year.
Yeah, Sympathizer's coming out later this year. I think the trailer's already out. Indeed, Robert Downey Jr. is in it. It's a quite international cast, so I'm looking forward to it, to be honest. And I'm very curious what he does, because even stuff, his more Western leaning stuff like Stoker and such, and Decision to Leave for me was even also more Western Western leaning. It's still very interesting to look
Yeah,
at.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how can I top what Rabia said? Yeah, I just feel that he's such a beautiful director. Like, even though his content can be really downright nasty, you know, and like touches on some really taboo subjects like child murder, like somehow he makes it beautiful. Like that, how should that be possible?
Mm.
You know, should that be possible? Somehow he does it though. And even, you know, I think about the vampire film he did Thirst.
Yeah.
It was such a different take on vampirism, and it was beautiful despite the fact, you know, there's some really gross bits in it. It's just I really love films that bring about the beauty of horror, whether that's, you know, like real life horror or fantasy horror. And I just feel like he's a director that does it so well that, you know, you'll be, you know, kind of squirming through his film and also appreciating its beauty. And then at times he makes you laugh as well. And I just think that's, to be able to go through all of this kind of, these kind of, from, you know, horror, beauty, whatever, and then to also make you laugh, I just think such a smart director, such a one of a kind director as well.
Yeah, I can't really add anything to whatever what you both said there. I mean, he's one of my favourite directors. He's largely responsible for the movies that I like today, so I'll always love him through thick and thin. He's the best, really, isn't he? He was part of a great movement of other directors that came out of Korea, Bong Joon-ho, and there's Kim. Wasn't Kim Ki-duk, was it? Kim Ji-woon. Kim Ji-woon was the other one. It was sort of a generation of three. And those three basically revolutionized Korean cinema, because before that, who knew what Korean cinema was? It was just a peninsula near China and Japan. People didn't really know it had this sort of wonderful filmmaking, TV, and sort of arts and media industry in a global sense. Local people knew, of course, but in a global sense. And these three people have just I think they've got a lot of responsibility, good responsibility, for bringing Asian cinema to an entire new generation. I think it did a better job than, I mean, you could say the same of Japan horror in the 1990s, but I think this cut deeper and wider, especially the movies of Park Chan Wook. I think they just cut through completely culturally across the world and, you know, made fans of all sorts of movies. I mean, the fact that OldBoy is a film bro movie is just the weirdest thing in the world.
Yeah.
But it happened.
I think the only one who's comparable from the same era, basically, of the upcoming of Asian films is Takashi Miike, especially with stuff like Ichi the Killer, for instance. That was also the early noughties, so
Yeah.
around the same time as OldBoy.
He had huge cut through.
Yeah, so you had Shimike from Japan, and then you had the Park Chan Wook from Korea, and that was that same wave, and they really set the tone of how extreme Asian film could be. Also,
because there was a lot of hangover of that time, wasn't there? Like Asia, that place that does all the Hong Kong action movies. No,
Robo Vampire. If you know what that is,
yeah,
I respect you. Robo Vampire, for any of the listeners, look it up.
Good enough to end on as any, I think. Robo Vampire. So, Rabia, where can we find you and your stuff online?
I am known online as Rpish, Rpish. I'm on a lot of different platforms, but if you look me up on my socials, so Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon, Threads, whatever else is out there nowadays, if you type in Rpish, you'll find me, you'll find whatever I'm working on. Also, my website is rabiasitabi.com. You can also find all my features and the podcast that I'm featured on there as well. I do a lot of different stuff. I'm the head of marketing of two major film festivals, Kaboom Animation and Imagine Fantastic Film Festival. So I do a lot with films. Other than that, with the culture curators, I need to start writing again. I haven't done that in a while, but you know, who has time? But yeah, if you want to get a lot of insights, and especially like niche, like unknown titles when it comes to horror, fantasy, sci-fi, and cult movies, then I'm your gal. Follow me on Letterboxd. That's the best way to meet. Also, Rpish on there as well, by the way.
And Ygraine.
You can find my podcast, What a Scream, which is a horror movie podcast on any sort of platform you listen to podcasts on. I'm on social media, What a Scream, and I also have my website, whatascreampodcast.com, where I do movie reviews. You can even find the podcast on there, etc., etc.
Yes, you can find me across all of the social medias at Uncut Robcast. But until next time, when we'll be revisiting Park Chan Wook with First and the Handmaiden, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.